There's this scene in Kamen Rider Kuuga where Godai is in a room on his own watching a news report about the latest Grongi attack, and he's only shot from behind, but thanks to the actor's body language, you can tell he is just trembling with rage as the death toll is being read out, as if at any moment he could completely fly off the handle into a blind rage. And then something very interesting happens. One of the other characters enters the room and he turns around and suddenly all that anger is gone. He's the same calm, positive, happy-go-lucky Godai we'd known for the entire show up until that point. And to me, that scene is everything. Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm the Vacuuminator, a guy who likes to take a break from it all every once in a while just to get out into nature and reminisce about one of the greatest shows he's ever seen. And if that sounds like your kind of jam, if you're down for that, don't forget to do the YouTube things, engage with the algorithm, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. I'll tell you a little more later, but right now, I feel like it is the best possible time to talk about one of the most significant writer shows of all time, because people tend to forget about it this day with how deep we are into the era that it spawned. But Kamen Rider Kuuga was a watershed moment for the franchise. It was the first Rider show in 10 years, the first Rider anything in 6, and it was the first series to be made without any direct input from the franchise's creator, Shotaro Ishinomori, though it does go out of its way to pay homage to him. And all of that is very significant factors that I think led it to be as different as it was from everything that came before it and spawn a whole new era. Up until that point, Kamen Rider had largely been sci-fi monster of the week stories about cyborgs fighting off secret organizations, and Couga chooses to eschew those to create, as the opening titles say, a new hero and a new legend by way of mysticism and magic and mysterious ancient cultures, because the backstory of the series is that there were once long ago, before human history was recorded, two warring tribes, the Grongi, animalistic, sadistic monsters that hunted other people as part of a game called the Gege-Ru, and the Linto, a tribe that was much closer to actual humans who fought to stop the Grongi and protect the rest of the world from them, even going so far as to create the mystical Arkle belt, which could transform somebody into a creature that was just as powerful as the Grongi. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because all of that is backstory that's slowly doled out to us over the course of the show. In actuality, it just kicks off with the Grongi and Linto's final tomb being unearthed by a bunch of unsuspecting archaeologists who all get slaughtered, leading to a police investigation, which leads to local freeder and nice guy Godai Yusuke wanting to look into it himself out of just pure curiosity, and his researcher friend being kinda interested in the new language they discovered there. But as these things tend to, that decision leads to Godai getting caught up in the first real Grongi attack at Police HQ, and the Arkle calls out to him and bonds with him, transforming him into Kamen Rider Kuuga, which creates the impetus for the whole rest of the series. Him fighting this one-man war against the Grongi, because Kuuga is the only rider in this show, the only real superpowered character besides the Grongi. And I think that was a very clear decision, because while we had other rider shows with just one rider before then, Kuuga very much is about a world where there's just one person who can stand against these monsters that are attacking people. Even though it has this mystical power source and backstory that drives the plot, the actual day-to-day operations of the show feel very grounded and realistic, because it chooses to use Godai's just general nice guy, I want to help people personality as a way to let other characters flourish. There are tons and tons of subplots and mini arcs within Kuuga, to the point where I could be rambling about this show all day if I wanted to. The only real ones I feel like I have to talk about, though, are Godai's relationship with his liaison to the police and his former school teacher, which both are developed a whole lot early on in order to create this sort of strong foundation for the rest of the show. Because you see, after saving Detective Ichijo and some other police from the initial Grongi attack, the guy takes an interest in Godai and starts following him around to try and figure out where his powers come from and what he's getting for all this. And at the same time, he's trying to placate the rest of the police force to tell them that Godai is not a threat like the rest of the Grongi, and he's actually trying to help and facilitate a sort of working relationship between the two. But at the same time, he's very baffled and annoyed by Godai's easygoing attitude, and routinely tells him that he needs to take things more seriously, because this is a huge problem they're dealing with, which eventually culminates in Godai telling Ichijo that he does take the whole thing seriously, that he is fighting for everyone, and that he's just trying to do it his way, but declaring that if it's what's needed of him, he will fight in the way Ichijo needs him to, in probably one of the most iconic scenes in all of Kamen Rider, the big speech moment where Kuuga transforms in the middle of a burning church and beats the crap out of a monster. It is a really striking scene to finally see for yourself in full context, I have to say. And it's shortly after that we get a two-parter about Godai trying to meet up with an old school teacher of his while dealing with Grongi attacks at the same time. A teacher who is very significant to him and gave him some crucial life advice, all about the thumbs up, something that Godai has made into his own personal symbol for hope and bravery. And we get this big speech from the teacher all about how the thumbs up is rooted in ancient Rome, that it was this all-powerful seal of approval for gladiators, that the work they were doing was what needed to be done. It's another watershed moment for the show that cements Godai as this all-good heroic figure. And after that, we kind of settle into the format for a lot of the rest of the show. And it's at this point where a lot of people usually say that the show kind of lacks, that it falls apart, that it really drags in the middle. But I'm personally inclined to disagree with that, because while there's not a ton of focus and development for our main cast at this point, it's all about building out the world and all these incidental characters and side arcs that are going on around them, allowing Godai to truly just become a vehicle for this toy commercial with a lot of heart to it. Again, there's too many characters to really delve into why I like this chunk of the show in my format, but some of my favorite bits of the whole show come at this point, like the moment in the teaser I talked about, the episode about the Grongi that decapitates folks, which ends in one of the most tense sequences I've ever seen in Tokusatsu, the episode that focuses on the pregnant lady who's very concerned about the world her child is going to be born into. It's at this point in the show where Japan itself starts to become a character within Kuuga, that we focus so much around the world surrounding our characters that the story feels more real and grounded than really any other writer show. Even the other ones in its part of the Heisei era, Kuuga feels like a show very much about, like, okay, a race of monsters is attacking Japan. What does that actually look like? How does that change everyday life? How do people think and feel about that? How long does it take the police to catch up enough to be able to be effective against these things at all? And that's where a lot of the charm of the show is for me. That attention to the fine details of the world that you rarely see in modern toku shows. It's also at this point that I started to realize Kuuga has some of the best aesthetics of any writer show I've seen. The suit design is very simplistic, but it's really indicative of the time and budget and charming in that way. Again, the decision to really just go with chest plates to differentiate Kuuga's forms, where it annoys me in modern writer shows, actually feels really charming and beautiful here. The same thing with the Grongi kind of just being gross looking humanoids with animal heads and loincloths. It all kind of melds together in this sort of pseudo aesthetic that feels very comfortable and at the same time off-putting, if that makes any sense. Also, while I'm detouring from talking about the show, let me just say I love the Kuuga score. It's one of the only writer scores I regularly listen to because I love how atmospheric it is, how it really can be comfy and cozy, but at the same time epic and inspiring, or just plain creepy and off-putting, like this fucking bird over here. And trust me, I get it. Kuuga's middle portion is very slow and methodical, which feels at odds with how the opening and ending episodes are so focused and driven, but I think there's a very clear point to it. You know, once you've gotten Godai to the point of coming off to the audience as the all-good, nice hero boy, and you understand his relationship to all the other major characters, there's not much you need to do until you start getting into the final episodes, except building on that investment and making you invested in those side characters as well as Godai and Ichijo, making you invested in the world. Because as I said, Japan itself feels like a character within Kuuga thanks to all the world building they do. And because of that, Kuuga is the only writer show where I've actually felt like the world is at stake. You know, you're told that a lot in other writer series, but Couga is the only one where you really feel like this is a scary thing that could be right outside your door and could end your life. And part of that is because a very specific detail they put in to constantly build the pressure on Godai to be the good hero is there's realistic travel times in Couga. He has a souped up, super fast, super powered motorcycle, but it still takes him a while to get all across Japan to fight the Grongi, because they're not just attacking in the Tokyo area, they're attacking in all kinds of places. And because of that, the realistic drive times mean the Grongi are attacking for a while before Kuuga gets there to stop them. And in that time, people die. We rarely see on-camera deaths in the show, but we're always told the death toll from attacks, and it's always made very clear that this is a serious thing that's weighing on Godai. And in addition to that, there's the fact that the Grongi speak their own language. Yeah, it's a cipher of Japanese, but in a lot of subs, it's left untranslated, and that helps add to the sense of otherness and anxiety when it comes to the Grongi. You really can't tell what they're doing unless you choose to watch one of the subs that does actually translate it. But for my money, that adds to the show's rewatchability. You're not supposed to be able to know the Grongi early on, so watch it untranslated first, and then on your rewatch, watch it translated and see that a lot of the shit they were saying was really just, I'm gonna kick your ass, Kuuga. But that's just one of the great things about the show, the anxiety of having the Grongi be slowly translated helps build your anticipation for when you get to that penultimate episode with the final showdown between Kuuga and Doguva, a Grongi they've been building up in the background under hushed tones as this all-powerful last boss who's very similar to Kuuga in having a human form, and their battle could possibly end the world. That when you actually get there and Kuuga and Doguva are face to face in this snowy hilltop, and you're on the edge of your seat thinking like, okay, it's the end of a Kamen Rider show. Of course, this final fight is going to be this big, epic action set piece with all kinds of crazy stunts and camera angles. There's going to be a big insert song playing heroically in the background. Maybe we'll get some cool belt noises and dialogue between the two characters showing how ideologically opposed they are. And Kuuga subverts all those expectations in one of the most brilliant moments I've ever seen of that happening in not just Rider, not just Tokusatsu, but anything. Because the camera backs completely off. All the sound falls out. And you're just left with these two very similar looking suits. Kuuga's final form, this black and gold, almost monstrous evolution of his initial forms that only appears in this episode, and a white and gold Grongi slugging it out, doing basically the same moves to each other, as the only sounds we get are these wet, meaty punch sounds and the whistle of the wind. It feels so stark and blunt and different from everything that you've come to expect from Kuuga and Rider in general up to that point, that when I first saw it, it really made me think back on many key moments that had led up to that point, like the one I talked about in the teaser, or one in that same episode where Godai actually flew off the handle and savagely beat a Grongi for attacking schoolboys, or the burning church moment, or a moment where Godai accidentally kicked a Grongi so hard it sent out a shockwave that shattered windows across the city. That it made me realize that with building up that impression of Godai as this all-good, nice hero boy, the show let me in on the same level as some other characters, that it wanted me to think that Godai was just this perfect, nice boy who could do no wrong and was just happy to be a superhero and be helpful to people. But when you actually think about those moments, when you think about how hard Ichijo had to drill him early on to get him to take the role seriously enough to fight the Grongi the way he has been, it's at that point that you realize Godai's been carrying this incredible burden this whole way, that he is very much a deconstruction of the all-good hero archetype, showing that yes, a person can be that way, but at the end of the day, it weighs on them so hard and totally that when you get to that final climactic battle and you're able to fully let loose, you're no better than the villain you're fighting. I think in that moment, Kuuga is showing a very clear message that no matter what purpose it's for, violence will always bring you as low as your enemy. Yes, you may not have been given a choice by your enemy. You may have only been able to help others escape their wrath by being violent towards them. But at the end of the day, you're still going to be basically the same person doing the same thing. But it's actually not that bleak, because this is still Kamen Rider, and this isn't happening in the final episode. The final fight happens in the penultimate episode, and the actual final episode of Couga jumps forward a little bit, and we see all the characters we'd gotten to know throughout the show, all the little side characters and subplots resolved, with everyone moving on to bigger and better things in their life, and being so happy to do so, being so thankful for Godai's sacrifice, for everything he went through, and talking about what an amazing person he is and the effect he had on their lives. And unlike other writer shows I could talk about, it actually feels really earned, because up until that point, people hadn't been talking about how amazing Godai was. They'd mostly just been a little bit bemused by him, or intrigued by his powers, or the backstory that they entailed. It's only in this final moments where everybody is moving on from the Grongi crisis and being thankful that it's over, that they realize how much Godai went through, and even then, they don't realize as much as we do, because Godai kept that facade of being a cheerful guy up around them. It only ever dropped in moments we saw. And after all that, we don't even see Godai until the final moments of that last episode, and when we see him, it's in the same context we first saw him, using one of his 2,000 skills to entertain some kids during one of his travels. We're shown that he's returned to his old life, because, well, violence can corrupt a person and destroy a bit of their soul and bring them as low as the person they're trying to stop by being violent. Everyone still has the capacity for change. They still have the ability to get better and go back to living a calm and peaceful life. And that's what Godai does. And the fact that he does that, the fact that the show ends with him walking off into a bright, sunny future after having given the thumbs up to a bunch of random kids, that you really get how hopeful the show truly is, how much it wants people to be better, and uses Godai as an example of how we can get there. And this whole world builds towards that core idea. And it's also why I'm kind of okay with the fact that Godai's never really actually come back in Kamen Rider. Sure, there's the alternate Godai that shows up in Decade, and they bring out the suit whenever there's a big crossover movie, but Joe Odagiri has not returned to the role since the series wrapped. And I used to be really annoyed with that, and occasionally would talk about how, oh, he needs to come back for this, that, or the other thing. But, well, I would still be thrilled if he did. Upon re-examining the show for this video, I realized that it actually really works thematically that we haven't seen the original Godai since Kuuga. Because that part of his life is over now. He's not a violent person anymore. He's back to being the good boy we found him as. And that's kind of wonderful. I'm happy for him. Well, I would be the first person to watch whatever big crossover movie they got Joe Odagiri back for. At this point in time, I don't feel like I need it. I feel like Couga is stronger because it is so self-contained. Because it is just this nice, comfy show that feels couched in realism and has so many characters with so many interesting things going on, all built around this one guy who was there when the world needed him, and when they didn't anymore, he went back to enjoying himself. There's something really magical about that, I think. And that's why Couga is not just one of the best writer shows or tokusatsu shows, but one of the best TV shows I've ever seen, period. It's right up there with Gokaiger for me. And I highly recommend, if you are watching this video and you haven't seen it, that you check it out. Especially because it's one of the few writer shows that is legally available here in the West with English subtitles, both on streaming and physical. If you haven't gone to Tokusatsu and watched at least a couple of episodes of Couga, you're doing yourself a disservice. So please do. And before you go, please do the YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, feed that algorithm, tell it to help my videos grow. And if you've been here for a while doing that, maybe consider taking your support to the next step. I have a Patreon, $1 a month, early access to videos, behind-the-scenes podcast once a month, and your name in the end credits. It's not a bad deal. And neither is my weekly Tokusatsu podcast that I do with Buster Corp over on the Modular Media channel, or one of these sweet shirts. I got a shirt store. Go check that out. Go check out Twit. Go check out my my support networks, I guess is what I can call them, and go check out Couga. Because, as I like to say, you never truly fail until you stop trying. And that is why we should all learn from Couga's example and continue trying to be someone worthy of this symbol. Until next time.